You know, there's this one paradox that's been nagging at me since I opened the text this morning.
Oh, yeah?
We have a star, and its main symbol is a swinging hammock, a soft bed. It's basically the universe saying, go take a nap.
Right.
And yet, the ancient seers, they classified this star as Ugra, which means, what, fierce, severe, aggressive?
That's right. Fierce.
So how do you reconcile those two? I mean, how is a hammock fierce?
And that is the central riddle of the star we're visiting today. But hang on, before we solve it, just take a breath. Can you smell that?
The coffee, it's incredible. I swear this mental cafe of ours always has the perfect roast.
Exactly. We're here to slow down. And that right there is actually the first clue.
Ah.
We are diving deep into the Nakshatra known as Purva Phalguni. And in answer your question about why a hammock can be fierce, well, think about a lion.
Okay.
A lion can sleep for 20 hours a day. But would you ever call a lion lazy?
No, and I certainly wouldn't go poke one to find out.
Precisely. This star is the sleeping lion. And today we're going to explore why the universe actually requires that kind of aggressive intensity to produce true, deep relaxation.
I like that.
We'll look at the whole celestial architecture, the deity Bhaga, and this whole philosophical idea that rest isn't just a break from work. It's actually a weapon for creation.
Rest as a weapon. I love that. Okay, so let's orient ourselves. We're looking at Purva Phalguni. Where are we in the sky?
So if you look up, we're deep in the sign of Leo. You know, seen high. Specifically, we're in the range between about 13 degrees and 26 degrees of Leo.
So we're right in the thick of the lion.
We're at the rear flank, actually. The ancient astronomers identified this part of the sky with the stars Zosma and Leonis.
The rear flank.
Yeah, so if the last star we looked at, Maga, was the throne room, the king's heart, this is the lion's back. It's the spine, the support structure.
And the name itself, Purva Phalguni, what does that actually translate to?
It translates as the former reddish one? Yes. And the color red here is really specific. It's not just a color. It's a signal of Raja's, passion, activity, heat.
Okay.
But it also means ripening. In fact, another common translation for this star is the fruit of the tree.
The fruit of the tree. Yeah, I saw that in Dennis Harness's work.
Right. And if you think about a tree, there's so much work that goes into it, right? The roots, the trunk, the branches, that was all the previous star, Maga.
So Maga is the effort.
Maga is the effort, the lineage, the throne. Purva Phalguni is that moment when the fruit finally appears. It's the stage where all your karmic labor finally ripens into something tangible you can enjoy.
This is the payoff.
It is absolutely the payoff. But there's a really fascinating planetary conflict here that sort of defines the whole vibe.
Okay.
This star is located completely within the sign of Leo, which is ruled by the sun, the king.
Right.
But the star itself, its direct ruler, is Venus Shukra.
The sun and Venus. Huh. That feels like an odd mix. You've got the burning authority of the sun mixed with the soft artistic pleasure of Venus.
It's what we call a solar Venusian blend. And you're right, they are planetary enemies in a certain sense.
Yeah.
The sun is all about ego, soul, authority.
And Venus is relationship, compromise, art.
Exactly. But when you blend them in this specific sector of the sky, you get something totally unique. You get the king at rest.
The king at rest.
Just imagine a monarch who's finished the war. He's secured the borders. Now he retreats to his private chambers to enjoy music and art and romance. That is the energy here.
Ah.
It's theatrical because the sun is involved, but it's focused entirely on aesthetics and pleasure because of Venus. The term for it is royal leisure.
That paints a really vivid picture. It's not just, chilling on the couch in sweatpants. It's lounging on a velvet chaise while someone feeds you grapes.
In a way, yeah. It is the transition from the throne to the couch.
Yeah.
But this brings us to the deity, because this isn't just about hedonism. It's about something much, much deeper.
Right. The presiding deity is Bhaga.
One of the 12 Adityas, the solar deities.
And on the surface, Bhaga seems like the guy you want at your party. He's described as the god of good fortune, inheritance, marital bliss.
The god of getting lucky, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the surface level, and it's not wrong. Bhaga is the dispenser of resources. He's the one who makes sure family wealth gets passed down, or that a marriage is happy. But if we want the real deep dive perspective, we have to look at the Vedic interpretation, specifically from Sri Aurobindo.
I've got that note here. Aurobindo calls Bhaga the enjoyer of the power of truth.
That's it. That is the key that unlocks this entire star.
Okay, unpack that for me, because enjoyer of truth sounds a whole lot different from god of wealth.
Think about it this way. In our modern world, we often separate pleasure from truth. We think pleasure is a distraction or maybe even a vice,
Sure.
But in the Vedic view, especially for this star, true prosperity, real good fortune, is the natural bliss, the ananda, that just arises when your life is aligned with cosmic truth.
So you're not just getting rich because you've figured out a loophole in the system. You're prospering because you're in flow with how the universe actually works.
You've got it. Bhaga represents the joy of manifestation. If you create something that is true, whether that's a piece of art, a relationship, or a business, the natural result should be joy and enjoyment. If you find yourself miserable while you're successful, you aren't worshiping Bhaga. You're missing the truth part of the equation.
That's a really powerful distinction. It reminds me of the contrast with the very next star, Purva Phalguni, which is ruled by Ahriman.
Yes, and that contrast is so helpful for understanding Bhaga. Ahriman is the god of contracts. He's the friend who arranges the marriage. He is the vow.
And Bhaga is?
Bhaga is the enjoyment of the marriage. Ahriman is the prenup. Bhaga is the honeymoon.
I see. So Bhaga is the feeling, Ahriman is the structure?
Precisely. But there's a danger here. The mythology gives us a pretty stark warning. There's a famous story in the Mahabharata where Rudra, the fierce form of Shiva, attacks a sacrifice of the gods. And in that attack, he plucks out Bhaga's eyes.
Ouch! Why his eyes?
Because Bhaga was described as being lusty to look upon attractive forms. It's a warning about the shadow side of this star. When you get too lost in the sensory form, the beauty of the object, the wealth, the physical body, you lose sight of the spiritual truth that's behind it. You become blind to the deeper reality.
So enjoy the fruit, but don't get so obsessed with the fruit that you forget the tree it came from.
That's it, exactly. And speaking of trees and fruit, we need to talk about the power source of this star, the Shakti.
This is the Prajanana Shakti, the power of procreation.
Yes. Now, immediately, people hear that and think, okay, this is the star for having babies.
Yeah.
And it is. It absolutely represents fertility. But on the celestial plane, we're talking about something so much broader.
Okay.
We're talking about the launching pad.
A launching pad for what?
For creative ideas. For anything you want to bring from the unmanifest world into the manifest world. The symbol often associated with this star is the Shiva lingam.
Which is a symbol of generation.
It's the ultimate symbol of that creative spark. And the source material breaks this Shakti down in a very specific way. It says the basis above is the female partner, and the basis below is the male partner.
And the result is the fetus, or the creation.
It creates a union of polar opposites. And this is why Purva Phalguni is so essential for creativity. It isn't just one force acting alone. It's the friction and the union of opposites. Sun and Venus, male and female, soul and form.
And there's a myth about a procession that ties into this, right?
The marriage procession of Lord Shiva.
Right. I read that Shiva's marriage to the goddess Parvati is said to have started under the star.
Now think about the significance of that. Shiva is the great ascetic, the ultimate outsider. He's covered in ash, meditating in caves, completely detached from society.
And Parvati is the world.
She is the Shakti, the energy of the world. Purva Phalguni is the bridge where that outsider god enters the social structure.
It's the moment the bachelor becomes the husband.
It's the moment the solitary genius enters the marketplace. It's where the ascetic learns to dance. That is the whole vibe of Purva Phalguni. It's the social celebration of a sacred union. It makes the divine accessible through relationship.
Which would explain why people with this star strong in their charts are often so charismatic. They have that wedding party energy.
They do. They have a zest for life. But this brings us all the way back to your hook, the paradox.
Right.
We have this vibrant, creative, procreative star. So why the hammock? Why the laziness?
Yeah, let's unpack the hammock, because if I'm launching ideas and leading processions, I'm definitely not lying in a hammock.
This is where we have to look at the blueprint, the gunas, the qualities of nature that make up the star. Every star has a kind of code. And for Purva Phalguni, the code is Tamas, Rajas, Tamas.
Okay, just to clarify for everyone listening, Tamas is inertia or rest, and Rajas is activity or passion.
Correct. So look at that structure. It's a sandwich. You have Rajas, that high activity, that passion, that creativity right in the middle.
But it's bracketed on both sides by Tamas, by rest.
Activity surrounded by rest.
I see.
That is the strategy of the hammock. It is not laziness in the modern negative way we think of it. It's incubation. To access that intense solar Venusian creativity, that middle layer of rajas, you absolutely must have the tamas. You must have the stillness.
It's like an athlete tapering before a big race, or honestly, it's like a cat getting ready to pounce.
That is the perfect analogy. And that answers your opening question about why this star is called Ugra, fierce.
Because of the lion.
Imagine you see a lion sleeping in the savannah. It looks peaceful. It looks like a big fluffy rug. But if you walk over and kick it,
You're in a lot of trouble.
you are in serious, serious trouble. The source material notes that disturbing a Purva Phalguni native's comfort zone is akin to disturbing a sleeping lion. The fierceness is a defense mechanism. They protect their rest fiercely because, subconsciously, they know their entire creative output depends on it.
That just completely recontextualizes the whole lazy stereotype. It's not checking out, it's charging up.
It has to be.
Yeah.
The universe requires a cycle. If you're constantly in rajas, constantly hustling, constantly grinding, you burn out the fruit before it even ripens.
Yeah.
Purva Phalguni understands the absolute necessity of the pause. The hammock is where the Prajanana Shakti, that power of procreation, gathers its strength.
So the fierceness isn't about running around attacking people, it's about the intensity of the potential energy.
And the intensity with which they will defend their right to enjoy the fruit. Remember, this is the fruit of the tree. If you work your whole life to grow an orchard and then you refuse to eat the apple because you're too busy, you've insulted the tree. You've insulted the entire process.
And that connects right back to Bhaga as the enjoyer of truth. If you don't enjoy the fruit, you're not completing the circle of truth.
Precisely. We live in a culture that often glorifies the sowing and absolutely shames the reaping. Purva Phalguni says, no. The reaping, the tasting, the enjoyment, that is a sacred act too.
That's a really liberating thought. It almost feels like permission.
It is cosmic permission. But, as with all these stars, there is a trap.
There's always a trap.
The trap is getting stuck in the hammock. If the tamas, the inertia, overwhelms the rajas, the activity, you don't get a sleeping lion. You just get a sloth. You get vanity. You get the desire for the fruit without any of the labor of the tree.
And that's the shadow side.
That is the shadow. When the desire to be noticed replaces the desire to create. When we seek the applause of the wedding procession, but we aren't willing to make the actual commitment of the marriage.
We are definitely going to have to go deeper into that shadow in part 2. I feel like there's so much there about vanity and maybe even narcissism.
Oh, absolutely. The reflection in the mirror can be a very dangerous thing for a lion.
So, to synthesize where we are today, we have Purva Phalguni, located in the rear of Leo. It's a star that looks like a bed, but it fights like a lion when it's disturbed.
Yep.
It demands we enjoy the fruit of our labor, not out of greed, but because enjoying it is an act of spiritual alignment with Bhaga.
And it reminds us all that true creativity requires a launching pad of stillness.
I think that's a perfect place to pause our procession for today. But before we go, what's the one thing you want the listener to take with them from this?
I want you to look at your own life, especially in this hustle culture that we all live in. If Bhaga really represents the enjoyment of truth, are you actually denying your own spiritual progress by refusing to rest? Are you rejecting a cosmic law by not enjoying your own success?
That is a heavy question. Is our guilt about relaxation actually a kind of spiritual error?
It might be.
Something to mull over with your next cup of coffee? Next time, we're going to look at the shadow, what happens when that hammock becomes a trap, and when the desire for pleasure sours into vanity. You won't want to miss that.
It gets fascinatingly dark.
Until then, stay curious.
And enjoy the fruit.